time now. We delve straight to our discussion zone.
I love Africa Global Radio.
And as I said, this week is all about the African Unity Week. We've been talking about it from different angles, and today we're looking at it from the Pan-Africanist, pro-African, perspective, their view on the African Union, and of course the day as well, because generally, what does it mean? What's the significance of that day? What are we looking at? Are we looking for a holiday? Are we looking for this or looking for that? How abreast are we, and how attached are we to the AU agenda right from inception? But then let's air Abu Akil's interview that I had with him earlier today. He talked about what the sentiment was like in the diaspora and what are some of the things they do. And of course, went a long way to also talk about some of the things he thinks that can be done to also get people on board on the African Unity agenda. Listen up.
Yes. I think for us here in the diaspora, in the UK part of the diaspora, ALD, there's a number of layers of this thing. So you've got people who are Pan-Africanists who are aware of African Freedom Day has been established by Kwame Nkrumah,
right,
in Ghana, and then it moving on to become African Liberation Day and being a global event. And it tends to be only people of the kind of who are politically aware who tend to be aware of it. So there's that layer of people who are a small proportion of the population who have an event each year and will communicate about it. With lockdown, last year there was a virtual event, and this year there will be a virtual event.
Okay.
For the vast majority of Africans, there isn't really an acknowledgement or recognition of our African sovereignty. And so for that part of the population, there isn't much that happens around it. So it's a small proportion of the population who tend to be aware of it.
Right.
So that's how it's been here. The vast majority of people are not aware of the need for African sovereignty. They're not even aware of African institutions. So the average person that I speak to who's come here from, say, from Ghana or Nigeria, most people in the UK are from West Africa.
Right.
And the vast majority of people, if you mention the African Union to them, they won't know what that body is.
What do you think could be the problem? If you take a look at the founding fathers, you can talk about Sekou Touré, Kwame Nkrumah, who was one of the pillars.
The challenge is this, that we have state bodies, but our relationships to those state bodies hasn't developed. So our educational system and our media system is more inclined to talk about what pair of shoes a pop star has bought, or what car, or how many houses they have, than to speak about more important issues for our collective development. So I think there's an individualism that's taken root in our communities, to the extent that we've got a middle class that's emerged as a consequence of our independence struggles. And that middle class has emerged and run down the rabbit hole of the West and not realized that the power for a nation lies in its people.
Right.
So raising up the awareness of your people to their condition and the institutions that will support them in developing their condition.
Right.
If people don't have that awareness, then you find the middle class goes to a high-paying salaried job in Europe or America, rather than using whatever their skills they have to develop the skills of people who are in their family, in their community, in their nation. So I think a big part of our issue is a bourgeois, petty bourgeois class who are not doing enough work around developing the media, a media that makes sure that if you're a homeless orphan, that you get the information, or if you're a high school student, or you're somebody who's on the beach, that the message needs to be a solid message. We're an African people, and we have structures that are about our interest, and we have to build those structures. We have to build the AU.
Definitely.
We have to build Ghana
Mm,
as a nation state that represents its people.
mm,
And because I know you're based in Ghana, and it's the same for every single African state.
absolutely.
The states need to be representative of the people's voice,
Right.
not one small group who can afford to send their children abroad
Mm,
to get educated in foreign institutions. The state resources to develop all of us.
right. Right. Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why
Mm.
ALD isn't, people are not aware of it in the way they should be, because the people who should be delivering the messages through the media and through the state are not.
Let's also come down to those who are very well vested in this space. Talk about the Pan-Africanist group in the diaspora. What's the general sentiments towards that particular day?
The general sentiment is one of it is our premier day in the year.
Mm,
For Pan Africanists, it's our central day of the year.
right.
African Liberation Day. I
Mm,
mean, that's the most important day. It's
mm,
about us being liberated.
right.
But it should be center stage as a critical day. One of the most important things is the quality of the relationships that we have with each other, and I think that the quality of relationships that we have with each other
Mm,
isn't as healthy as it could be. So we're not in a position where we have mass organizations
mm.
here.
Okay.
We're a small population, so it's admissible.
Right.
However, we're not quite at the point where our organizations have a political and economic awareness
Okay.
that's appraised of where we are in the 21st century. And where
Mm,
we are in the 21st century is we can be having relationships internationally. Where I'm speaking across the phone, thousands of miles. We have
right.
Zoom meetings. And I don't know that our organizations have really got to the point of making the connections between us. I think so. The Pan African community
Mm.
has to develop our core. And I think we've kind of always looked to the continent, like Ghana's looked at like as a very, very special place because of the legacy of Nkrumah. But
Hi guys, my name is Joey B, aka your friend is saying Beezy. Log on to Africa Global Radio, a story, a growth, a future.
Right, so that was Akil, co-chair of Global African Congress in the UK, and just gave us a brief, starters on the general sentiments on and what he thinks the whole day was like in the UK and how he actually, elaborated on some of the challenges. Because if you consider the fact that there are more people, especially coming from Western Africa, in the UK, and actually not actually knowing what's going on, and sometimes don't even know what the day is all about, and there's a problem. And for him, that's actually something that really needs to be done. And he also made emphasis on how the media, the institutions, the educational institutions are not really doing much in terms of trying to conscientize people about this particular thing, but rather talking about in his own words the new shoe of a pop star or what have you. So it's very significant that these particular things get corrected, because if not, we kind of like we're losing out, and the significance on why this particular day was formed in the first place is falling apart. So for him, this is something that really needs to be looked at again. So he also made mention of certain recommendations, because he mentioned the institution, which is the media, as one part, and then mentioned the educational part as well. And I asked him, so what does he think that the African Union also can actually, do to also encourage people to be very sensitive in terms of African Union matters, because that is something that, as a continent, we need. And he took it from, the just let's just listen up. We'll be right back.
I think I can take it on an administrative basis that they
Okay.
should have a structure to do that. But
Right.
I also, fundamental to the administration, it has to be a commitment. And I don't know if the African states actually have that commitment to the
Mm.
AU that they should have. So
Okay.
we're getting down to the granular level, because our state representatives are really supposed to be the voice of our constituencies. And if they're
Mm-hmm.
not the voice of our constituencies, then they can go into the AU and play silly games, rather than, because they're not. You have to be hearing the voice of the Prime Minister in the
Mm-hmm.
AU.
Mm-hmm.
If the
Mm-hmm.
Ghanaian Prime Minister isn't making the right noises in the AU,
Right.
if the Nigerian Prime Minister or head of state, the president, if
Okay.
the head of state isn't making the right noises in the AU, because the AU is a body
Mm.
that has heads of state there.
Right.
And if the heads of state are not fully accountable to African people and are more accountable to finance capital,
Okay.
the World Bank, and structural adjustment programs, then their conversations in the AU are going to lean in that direction. So I think there's something about a granular level.
Okay.
So the AU has a 2063, Agenda 2063, which is I think a magnificent document. It's a magnificent strategic direction. However, it's for the nation states to implement it.
True.
And the nation states are not having a conversation about it. I mean, again, I live in Europe, but I don't hear people in from Nigeria or from Kenya or from Rwanda. I'm not hearing people saying that their governments are speaking to the Agenda 2063. But I think there's much more to Agenda 2063. There is an agenda around no more killings, reduce the deaths, education for our women,
right?
Putting education in place, the international university, a university where everyone can access online.
Right.
In the UK, we have a model called Open University, and there's a similar model that the African Union has in its Agenda 2063. Over the past year, if that was in place, look at how far we would have advanced with this COVID thing. So making sure that there's a information infrastructure whereby young people, whether they're living in a village or they're living in a city, they can access the highest quality education that's appropriate to Africans, to where they live. There's high-speed rail. You know, this year there was the breaking of, or there was the removing of some trade barriers,
right,
between African states. So, and there's a public educational thing around that. You know, so there needs to be a conversation around 2063 that gives it flesh.
right,
And it is again down to the people. But I'd say there's a middle tier that has to play a role, like you're playing your role in the media, insofar as making sure there's conversations about these things.
Right, right.
But it should be center stage. I mean, for Africans, we should be talking about the AU. Every youth should know about the AU and 2063. Really, if you're a 16-year-old in Namibia, you know, you should know about Agenda 63. I mean, you don't even have to be able to read and write to know about it, really. It should be a buzz. That should be the conversation. So it says Pan-Africanism. What the issue is Pan-African education has not been developed as far as it should be at the ground.
Right.
At the grassroots level. That work doesn't seem to be happening.
Right.
Getting people from out from under, I don't think there's enough of that work happening.
Africa, ẹ̀yin ya.
Africa ń bọ̀. Èyí ni asọ̀rọ̀mágbèsì tó wá láti Áfíríkà fún orílẹ̀-èdè àgbáyé. This is Africa Global Radio.
All right, welcome back. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. 2:15 GMT live from our base, Accra, Ghana, to the rest of the world. You can listen to the show live Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. GMT, as we bring you explore everything happening on the continent of Africa. And of course, in the diaspora, we connect, kind of like the bridge, champion excellence right here. And of course, a couple of days back, we celebrated a very important day in the history of Africa, the formation of the African Union. And this is something that, pro-Africans, Pan-Africans, those who were, very young at that time in their primes, witnessed such a great day, especially those in the western parts of Africa, having key heads of state such as Sekou Toure, Modibo Keita, Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, being, spearheading this particular agenda. I had an earlier interview with Akil, co-chair of Global African Congress in the UK, and he gave a lot of, take in terms of how most people in the UK, especially most Africans in the UK coming from West Africa, are not really aware about this particular, or the significance of this day. And that for him is a problem. And also gave certain recommendations on what the AU as well as a body can do. And he took it from an administrative, angle on how they can actually use the Agenda 2063, make more talk about it and talk about it on the various, platforms, not just about the trade and getting people to sign to that? Because at the moment we have less than 50, we have about 33 signatories to that. And that's a worrying matter. What's the agenda? We're looking to have a unity, but that seems to be shaky. But like I said, we're going to be talking again in the studio with a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Mr. Albie Wall. He's seated right here with me. I will be bringing him on right after I take my colleague Hafiz Gunu's take on what Mr. Abu Akil made mention of his submission on, people in the diaspora and their sentiments surrounding African Union.
Well, thank you very much.
Right.
He made very salient points in there. And one that I believe every, Pan-Africanist, everyone that has Africa at heart,
Right.
Needs to pay attention to. Now, listening to him, he made one very important point about how there isn't enough acknowledgement of African sovereignty by the vast majority out there. And he even took issue with where the media priorities lie.
Right.
And taking a swipe
Talking
at
about pop stars and what have you.
taking a swipe at pop culture in that regard about concentrating on shoes and everything.
Right.
And he made very good points there. But you see, the thing about African unity and liberation, and he talking about African Liberation Day. Now, the focus on unity and everything. Now, every now and then we get issues popping up here and there where sometimes it tends to be a subtle reminder that you're not exactly welcome. I'm saying this in reference to every now and then when we get issues in South Africa where sometimes foreign nationals are victimized and everything. So it tends to be a reminder that, well, you're not exactly welcomed. And it's not just an issue peculiar to the continent. I mean, when you look at Europe, I mean, the discussion surrounding Brexit is centered on immigration and this us versus them mentality that you're not welcome in our society. And these things tend to get overblown. Now, he went ahead and Mr. Albie Wall is here, so I'm not going to take so much time. Now, he went on to talk about Agenda 2063.
Right.
Yes. And basically what Agenda 2063 is all about is talks about the structural transformation of Africa. So, yes, and this was occasioned, I think, in the Golden Jubilee celebration. Yes, somewhere May 2013.
Right.
Yes, and the whole idea is to have, the whole of Africa, member states inculcate this or put this together in their national, national plans. Yes, and this is going to be done based on 7 thematic areas.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing about it is that, of course, it's a plan on paper that is very good, but implementation we seem to have
practicality of it.
we seem to have problems here and there. He went on to mention trade barriers. Yes. Now, the issue of trade barriers is this: when you talk about trade barriers, now immediately there's so much excitement surrounding after the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, the thing with it is that yes, I mean, almost every country has signed up, with the exception of Eritrea. Yes, and they put out a very good statement about why not they want. But the crux of it is that they just don't want to be part of it. Now, the thing with AFTA2 is this. Now, when you come together to trade, now, it doesn't mean that the challenges you faced previously is just going to disappear overnight.
Right.
Yes, in terms of trade in Africa, you talk about poor roads linking various countries. It's still an issue.
Yeah.
You talk of issues of pockets of violence here and there, case in point Mali, that makes it very difficult for people to travel.
A bit dicey in there.
Yes, so it becomes a problem. You also look at the excessive bureaucracies at our borders. Sometimes what people are put through just so they can make a crossing.
Transport goods and what have you.
So these are problems. But I think those that have come together to put this are under no illusions. They understand that, well, it's not an event, it's a process.
The process, right.
And it has just started, and something has got to start. And that is one thing I like about it. That, yes, it's an admission that, yes, we need to actually do something about trade on the continent. And AFTA is definitely a good start.
All right. Thank you, Hafiz Gunu. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio, a Pan-African view on the AU. Let me welcome Mr. Albie Walls. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
Very fine.
I think the last time we met was on our first year anniversary where you talked a lot about Kwame Nkrumah and all. But very important day, 25th of May, 2021. I mean, in 1963, this was where you see a lot of African leaders coming together to bind themselves and come up with something very fruitful and make the continent very resilient in terms of all aspects, from health, economy, business. I mean, generally, just to make it a very powerful continent. But down the road so far, I'll actually bring you back to Akil's comment. But as a Pan-African, the 25th of May, what does it mean to you? And of course, a member of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party.
Well, as one who calls himself a Pan-Africanist, it's the most important day of the annual calendar for me as a Pan-Africanist. I think it's the one day in the whole year where African people globally are focused on Africa, its future, the way forward. So it's an opportunity for African people wherever they are to come together with a similar outlook, a similar perspective, or at least a similar agenda to try and come up with some answers and to discuss the challenges that we have been facing and the victories that we've had and some strategies for the way forward. So it's a very important day. Again, it may not be so significant on the parts of some governments or some different parts of African community, but I think for a Pan-Africanist, this is a day above all others that we can really focus on doing something.
Talking about significance of that day, others would argue that, okay, we need a holiday. It used to be a holiday in our base Ghana. Unfortunately, it's not anymore. One would say, okay, should it be a holiday or should it be a day that there should be that conscious effort to really, reflect upon what that particular day was about in Addis Ababa in 1963, or we need to get students to go to school so we can educate them more. What is the significance of that particular day to you?
Well, in terms of whether it's a holiday or not, it's really not so important to me, or I think that's not really the issue. The issue is what do we do with that day? Do we use it as a marker, as a symbol, as an opportunity to focus on African liberation? Because we could have African liberation. We could have observances in schools if that's what we want to do. But typically, in most countries in the world today, if you have a holiday, it's a day to go to the beach, a day to relax, a day off from work, a day off from school. It's not a day where you go and you focus on, the soldiers who died in World War II, and you talk about it with your family. That's not what happens on typically on a holiday. You have sales at the mall and things of that sort. So the significance of having African Liberation Day as a holiday is not, I don't think that should be the focus on whether it's a holiday or not. We have many holidays in Ghana, 10, 12, 14 different holidays. Some are for, founding of the UGCC.
Founding fathers.
I wonder if in the households on that particular day, if people discuss the founding of the UGCC on that particular day. I kind of doubt it. It seems like it's more of a ceremonial thing that happens at, maybe there's a television program, a documentary on such and such. But generally, I don't think you see the community focused on the events that occurred on those particular days. Other than, 6 March, of course, Independence Days typically are a day in which you do something. You hear lots of speeches, the Independence Day speech, etc. But still, I don't know. And sometimes there'll be discussions on programs such as this and in the media about how far have we come since this time, or are we pleased with the success or the progress that we've made, etc. But I think African Liberation Day can do the same thing in terms of focusing on a way forward, rather than just observing in 1963 in Addis Ababa, these people came together and signed this document. I don't think really that's what it should be about. We need to make history more lively, more relevant. It's up to us. It's not just because you have a day doesn't make it relevant. It's what we do with that day. If we say on that particular day, we want everybody, every school, every institution, every business to focus on how can we benefit from African unity, then we can really do something with it. But for now.
Are you worried as a pro-African? I mean, if you listen to one saying, we don't know what the AU is even doing, the AU has not done a lot, because we've spoken to a couple of people in that the AU has no use for me. I mean, because a union, a body that has to be, uniting the countries on the continent. And a lot of people have the sentiment that it's of no use, because if you take a look at some of the issues that are happening on the continent of Africa, some of them would be, let's say, for instance, a conflict happening in certain regions. We don't actually look to that body. We're looking for the external, interventions, the United Nations, other third parties. Are you worried about such a situation?
No, I'm not. In fact,
wow.
I mean, it's not involved and engaged as it should be, but I don't expect it to be. To be honest, I think, the African Union and even its predecessor, the Organization of African Unity, was a compromise. In fact, Nkrumah didn't win the vote. And so therefore, the OAU was created in a different way than what he had envisioned. He had envisioned a true mechanism to unite Africa. But eventually it became just kind of an old boys club where you got together once a year with the heads of state and they had a chance to have some nice seminars and discussions. But the reality it wasn't focused on uniting the continent of Africa. So now, even today, the African Union, I'm not really sure, now we have Agenda 2063, but I don't really know how committed these folks are in terms of the leadership, the elites within the society, to making that reality. I think that's, as your previous presenter or speakers mentioned, it needs to be more at the grassroots level, where the people themselves are the ones who are going to put the pressure. Because again, the OAU was, I would say, a defeat for Nkrumah in a lot of ways, because he lectured against this balkanization of Africa. He said the longer we waited, we were going to have heads of state who were committed to their individual countries. They would never want to relinquish their authority, their power, their stature as the president, a head of state of a particular nation, to a larger global Africa, to a continental body. So that's why I think even today, the AU isn't really seriously considering, I'm going to demote myself as president and make myself the governor of Ghana in a larger continental government of Africa. So I think that's the challenge. I think that the challenge will come from conscientizing, engaging, mobilizing people at the grassroots level as to how they can benefit from a united Africa. Because right now, that is not something that's presented to them. You hear about the free trade agreement, etc. And sometimes they think that's going to benefit them, but the reality is it's even not designed to benefit benefit the person on the ground. It's designed to benefit these certain companies
in the societies,
who will be able to trade more easily across borders. But as far as the local person who is trying to do some small business, it's not really going to transform
But isn't that
their life.
a problem?
It's very much a problem. So it's a disconnect between the heads who are the ones who are making the speeches and we always see and hear on television or in the media, and the person on the ground. So that's why there's a lack of interest, a lack of understanding, a lack of concern about what's happening with the African Union.
Amazing. So, you made mention of the OAU. So, after several years, the Muammar Gaddafi of blessed memory led a new one, which is it metamorphosed, I would say, to African Union, of course, in Durban, South Africa, when Thabo Mbeki was still the president. So would you say there was a failure of the OAU? Is that it?
To the fact that they transformed into the
AU?
African Union. I would say, the OAU, I'm one who finds that there's some good in everything. Even though you don't necessarily achieve what you set out to do or what we want to accomplish, there's certainly some things that you could say would be a benefit of it. It may not be. Sometimes the benefit is overwhelmed or outweighed by the negatives, but there's still some things. Like, for example, the OAU, they had a committee that helped, or a group of members of the OAU who led the forces towards the independence of the countries in southern Africa. Against apartheid, independence, and colonialism at the time was still in place.
True.
Portuguese countries, many colonies, etc. So they definitely played a role in helping to organize the military struggle against colonialism and apartheid in southern Africa and in some places in West Africa, Guinea-Bissau, etc. But overall, there weren't a lot of successes that you could chalk up to the OAU because, again, it became something different than what folks like Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré and some others had in mind when it was created. So the African Union, I think, then inherited this period of time where the accomplishment had not been reached. Muammar Gaddafi had a consciousness similar to, or an objective similar to what Kwame Nkrumah was saying, that we need to really unite as a political entity to have the strength to defend ourselves, to protect our interests in Africa and globally. And so, yes, that was the reason for creating an African Union, to say we're really going to move towards uniting Africa at this point. But again, if there's always opposing forces. It's not as if there weren't people opposed to Nkrumah in 1963. There were people opposed to Gaddafi in 2002. And unfortunately, those people have prevailed. They ultimately were able to assassinate him, to eliminate Libya's role as a leading force in uniting Africa. Because of the economic wealth that was present in Libya, because of the political vision that they had, they couldn't afford to have him be successful in uniting Africa.
Right, right. If we were to, let's start from the AU. If we were to give a thumbs up to the African Union, what would it be for?
Well, it's hard for me to, because again, the AU, I see it as primarily, we have to look at things from who benefits and who is intended to benefit from these things. So I think the outside forces that have supported the AU are actually benefiting from the fact that the AU has kind of provided an outlet or a relief valve so that when the pressure builds up, they say, well, we have an African Union, 2063, we're on the right path.
Okay.
Just be patient, take your time. It's a process. We shouldn't expect too much. It takes time, etc. So that in that regard, it's beneficial for those people who are trying to calm down the need or the pressure from the bottom for immediate change. Because we have the population of Africa is majority young people now.
Absolutely.
And so they don't have the patience to wait. We've been here 50 years already. You want us to wait another 50 years? No. I want to do something before my grandchildren come on the scene.
Right.
So there's a pressure. So that's what the African Union does, I think, provide an outlet. But I think there's an opportunity because in the same way that we're talking about African Liberation Day every year, in some places we're observing African Liberation Day in over 20 different places in Africa and in the diaspora, just that I'm aware of. There's probably more than that.
Right.
And so, from East Africa to Central, South, North, and West Africa, all observing African Liberation Day. So that provides an opportunity for some of those linkages that didn't take place or that are not taking place at the elite governmental bourgeois level, where there are actually organizations from these countries coming together, and young people are saying, look, we face the same problem
every now
and in our country that you're facing in your country. So let's come together and try and do some things together. So I think that's where the sentiment towards uniting Africa is really going to take momentum.
Right.
It's going to be from the bottom,
specifically
not from the top.
Youth.
Exactly.
All right. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio, and I'm speaking to Mr. Albie Wall, a member of All African People's Revolutionary Party. And yes, very interesting submissions he's making. And yeah, the youth, if you're listening, not to be rebellious, but strategically doing so peacefully. I mean, we've seen a couple in Ghana fix the country and all of that. So Hafiz Gun, I believe, has been writing a lot, has a lot for Mr. Wells. So you can actually, you have the platform, yeah.
Just putting down a few interesting pointers. You're talking about how asking, what important day it is, what an important day it is, African Liberation Day, as a Pan-Africanist. I mean, I don't know if I can put it that way. I mean, it's basically the Comic-Con for Pan-Africanists. So it's their day. Anyway, but I have just a question. Just if you could actually, just enlighten me in some of these things. Now, when you look at conversations surrounding, Pan-Africanism and all that, it's usually put forward as an academic exercise where, say Africa Liberation Day, you have a seminar, a discussion, some sort, to further enlighten people about, the contribution of our forefathers. Now, here's the thing. For someone that doesn't exactly have the range for such a conversation, how do you whip up that sort of interest in them? I mean, he's on the streets or by the streets just looking to make a quick buck and then get on with it. And you want him to join a conversation or to have a conversation on, our forefathers or freedom fighters. He's like, well, he feels more like it's not exactly something I'm interested in. Okay, so for such a person, how do you sell this conversation to them? How do you make them want to listen and, whip up that sense of nationalism in them?
Yes. I think part of it is, again, uniting people to let them understand that they are not alone, that you are not, the situation you're finding yourself in, the conditions, the challenges that you're facing are faced by many other African people across the continent and in the diaspora. And the solution to the problem is for us to recognize that and see what is it that's putting us in this situation. We have so many students who have graduated from secondary school, from universities, who are unemployed. So why is that? And so we start to look at examining what is the reason. There's definitely not enough jobs that the government can provide for all of these people. So if you start to have people questioning what is the reason for that, what needs to change, they will start to come to some solutions and recognize whether it's going to be we need to fundamentally change the structure of the society, the economy, whether we need to do something different in terms of our relationship with our neighboring countries. Because now even, as bad as we find it, say we're talking about Ghana, you will find other people saying, I wish things were as good as they are in Ghana. So you find people migrating and trying to come here because they think the opportunity is better here. Or you migrate within the country. You come from, the village in north to come to Accra, thinking that things are going to be better here, but yet and still you come here and you find the same challenges. So I think the primary thing at this point is you have to, as you're suggesting, relate to people where they are. They don't really need to hear another speech by Kwame Nkrumah. They really need to say, well, how can I get a job?
Exactly.
How can I find a house? How can I ever expect to marry someone and have children if I can't even afford to eat this week? So those are the questions that people are asking, and we need to show them, well, you can change that. It's possible if we unite Africa. Then that will open up the opportunities for employment, open up the opportunities for development, etc. Solving, the COVID crisis. All of these things could be better addressed if we are united together, rather than we have a Ghana Health Service, a Togo Health Service, a Burkina Health Service, all individually trying to do their small things. We come together, we have the capacity, much greater capacity to solve, whether, again, the problem is education or healthcare or housing. All of those things could be better done when we're united. So some of those things are going to resonate, I think, with those folks that you're talking about who don't really need to hear another speech by Sekou Touré or Thomas Sankara,
All right. That's all you have, or you have...
Yes, but just lastly, that's, your experience also shaped the way you accept the message. Because, more often than not, when you hear issues of, Pan-Africanism, you see those are the helm are usually diasporans that champion just because they seem to have lived in a worse system, so they understand the issues not just theoretically but practically.
Practically, right.
When you talk about racism, a lot of African experience here is more theoretical or abstract, if I should say. Okay, police brutality, even in one form or the other they get it, but having to face it, like the way an American would describe it, an African experience might not exactly be the same. So would you say where you live is also influencing, or where you've lived has also influenced, your appreciation for some of these issues?
Certainly it has some impact, what you've been exposed to, what your life has been, which is influenced by where you live, your culture, your immediate environment. But still, I think there are so many things that are very similar. When you mentioned the situation in Azania or South Africa, as many people call it, of where migrants or immigrants or people were Afrophobia, xenophobia, whatever. The same thing happens for me coming from outside. I've been here 20 years now. I can see some tensions even within Ghana. Right. If somebody's coming from, you're from this group, you're not really as necessarily felt as welcome. So that looks very similar to me to some of the racism that I have seen and experienced from outside. It's like, to me, it's this, I see like, you should speak, you don't speak Akan, your Akan, it sounds funny. You don't speak it very well. So you're somehow less than, you're not as seen as articulate or as intelligent. You speak this way, you speak that way, or maybe the opportunities for you are not as good as the opportunities if you come from another group or another family. So I do recognize some similarities, but again, I think sometimes we are presented them in a way that makes us feel like it's not the same. It's not as bad as, or you shouldn't be worried about it. At least you don't have the police aren't shooting you in the street. But still you're dying because you can't get to a health facility. You can't get malaria medicine for your child. So to me, the violence is there. It's not, again, it's a different type of violence. But the bottom line is people are dying prematurely. So that's the problem. I think getting people to recognize that it's just as violent for somebody, to watch your child die because of lack of medicine that costs, equivalent of $5 and which is, 20 CDs. Which is something that no one, someone can go to a drinking spot and spend that much on a Guinness,
right?
And here people are dying for that. So again, I think it's a way of which we present it to make people recognize that this is the problem, and it's something that relates to you or your child or your neighbor or somebody that is in this situation.
Right. Right, interesting. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. Real quick one so we can just wrap it all up. Now, we've seen the recent re-emergence of the military handling in Mali as well, and all of that. And prior to that, when the first incident happened, I mean, we saw the promises that the ECOWAS did, trying to support them with what have you, and it wasn't forthcoming. And one would say there was I don't know if there was, but there was a total disconnection from the AU. Because if the ECOWAS wasn't able to fulfill the promise in deploying and resources and trying to solve the situation, which actually forced the leader there to actually look for help elsewhere from the French, what's happening? Because Mali definitely has to be at the heart of African Union, AU, when you go back in history. But there was a disconnect there. What is your take?
To me, I see the problems in Mali are directly related to the history of Mali and the division of Africa. The fact that Mali even exists as a separate nation, which is impoverished and is providing all of this wealth for France. Because of as its former colonial power, they set up a system in which all of the work, the labor, the minerals, the resources of Mali went to benefit France. So today, when we can't blame the Malian people or the government of Mali or the people of Mali for their poverty. You have to blame it on the fact that they are still empowering, even now, even today, after they've gotten an independence, they have a flag, a national anthem, a president, all of those things. The wealth of the country is still going outside of Mali. And so then Mali then has to go to France, go to the IMF, go to America, go to beg for some money. But the money started in Mali in the first place.
Right.
It went there, and now we have to ask for it to come back. And that's the situation throughout the continent of Africa. So it's no different than what's happening here. I think you talked about we grow cocoa in Ghana, right? But we don't eat chocolate. Why do we grow cocoa? For someone else, to turn it into chocolate so they can make money off of the cocoa that our farmers grow. It doesn't benefit us at all. So that's because of that colonial situation. Maybe we would want to grow something that we actually ate instead of growing something that we then have to sell to someone else and then buy it back at prices that they sell. So you see that whether it's energy, whether it's food, all of those things that, France has one of the highest levels of nuclear power in France, right? But they don't have uranium in France. They get their uranium from Niger, another impoverished country in Africa.
Right.
So if Niger has all of this resource, but they're still impoverished.
Poor, yeah.
And France is one of the top economies in the world. So again, we have to recognize why it's not because of corruption. Many times they will tell us, even all of these international NGOs with the corruption indices, etc.
And all of that, right?
Yeah, they tell us it's our problem. If we just didn't have corrupt leaders, everything would be different. But no, it's not corruption. It's the fact that they're taking the wealth, billions and actually trillions of dollars. It's documented. It's coming out of Africa to enrich these other countries, and then we go and look for development partners to give us money, investors. No one's investing. They're investing to get a profit. You don't invest money as a donation.
Yeah.
You're investing money to get more back than you put in. So they're investing money into Africa so they can take more out. But we don't see it that way. We think they're here to help us.
Do you think the unity of Africa can actually stop some of these issues from happening?
Definitely. I think it's the only thing that can stop it, because there's no way a small country, Ghana is about the size of one small state in the United States. The population of Ghana is less than the New York City alone. So no, and Ghana is relatively big on the continent of Africa in terms of size.
Right.
So there's no way that this small country can go and deal with China and the UK and the EU and the US. It's not possible. So it's only when we come together, over 1 billion people on the continent of Africa, that we have the capacity that we have to both develop ourselves internally, to address these education issues, healthcare issues, infrastructure issues, energy issues, so many things that we can do if we're united together to do it, and even protect ourselves from those things who are coming from outside, whether it's trade or whatever it is, that culture, all of these things that are coming from outside that we can't stop.
Right.
In fact, sometimes we think it's to our advantage, so we ask them to bring it
in. Right.
And then it's our own, to our own detriment. So yes, the solution is the unity of Africa. And that's, I'm not saying anything new. And Nkrumah said the same thing 50 years ago.
Right.
Unfortunately, he didn't win the battle at that time, so we're still fighting. It's not over. We're still, and Gaddafi was trying to say the same thing. So we're still fighting that same fight. And ultimately, that's why.
I think we have a similar leader in Rwanda who is actually championing such a cause as well. You agree with me?
Well, it's controversial. I think I won't say wholly. I wouldn't put in with Gaddafi.
But our big question for the week. But our big question for the week is asking every pro-African out there: how do we attain this solution? That's the African unity.
Yeah, and again, I think as your previous speaker said, it's from the grassroots. It's educating people at the bottom as to how they can benefit, why this is helpful for them, and then they will move toward it.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Albie Wall, for joining us on this segment. It's been very fruitful, and I think we need to get back to the grass. Start with the youth and everything. Thank you so much. We shall again. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio.